and stress, right? And when I was putting it together, I didn't realize it at first, but I realized that a lot of these things go back to the laws of health. Does anybody realize? You know, the laws of health affect everything, all except sunlight and air. So let's take a look at this here. It says, thou shalt not kill. And when you think about thou shalt not kill, what comes to mind? Oh, let me go back. I don't want you to read the quote I have there. When you think thou shalt not kill, what do you think about?
Eat.
I'm hearing both persons. Say again?
Yeah.
I'm hearing Brother Davis.
Yes, morning, Sister Brittany. I'm
Hi.
saying that when you think of thou shalt not kill, then first thing you think is, boy, just dead the cough on the grave. You know, don't kill a person that they just has become dead.
Right.
But when you think a second time, then you realize that killing have to do with hurting someone in any way that would threaten life.
Okay. All right. So you think of killing somebody maybe in cold blood when you think thou shalt not kill. All right.
Right. So that's the first thought. But secondarily, you would think differently.
Okay. Thank you, Brother Davis. Anybody else? I'll take one or two more.
Kill to eat.
Kill to eat. Okay. Good.
Others, you hardly ever think about killing yourself.
You think about, when you think thou shalt not kill, don't kill your brother, don't kill your fellow man, but not yourself. Okay. All right. That was Brother Kenny. Thank you so much. All right. So this says the sixth commandment is thoughtlessly violated. To take one's life instantly is no greater sin in the sight of heaven than to destroy it gradually but surely. Persons who bring upon themselves sure decay by wrongdoing will suffer the penalty here, and without a thorough repentance will not be admitted into heaven hereafter any sooner than the one who destroys life instantly. Wow. The will of God establishes the connection between cause and its effects. Now, when I read this, I was mind blown. First time stumbling upon this quote, because sometimes when you think about persons who commit suicide, and why would they kill themselves, you know, and they're going to hell, you know, when you hear some people speak about that type of situation, suicide is a terrible sin. How dare you take your own life? However, rarely do we think that in our habits daily, we are taking our life slowly but surely. Can you imagine that? And in heaven, there is no difference. There's not one that's higher than the other. The commandment still says, thou shalt not kill, whether it's instantly or gradually. All right. So slaves to corrupt passions. It says, some who profess to be followers of Christ know that they are sinning against God and ruining their health, yet they are slaves to their own corrupt passions. They feel a guilty conscience and have less and less inclination to approach God in secret prayer. They may keep up the form of religion, but yet be destitute of the grace of God in their hearts. They have no devotedness to his service, no trust in him, no living to his glory, no pleasure in his ordinances, and no delight in him, right? So the Bible talks about those who are slaves to their passions. You know, which master do you choose to serve? And so we have to really examine ourselves and see who are we serving? We're serving God or we're serving another master. So let's talk a little bit about self-abuse. Does anybody have any idea what self-abuse is before I go into it? For those of you who know, please allow others to share, like Brother Davis. I love you, Brother Davis. Anybody else?
Am I included in that too?
All right, Brother Kenyal, go ahead.
Is it like masturbation?
Yes. Yes. Yes, it is. I shouldn't say yes to Brother Kenyal a while ago. I wanted other persons to share. But
Indeed.
Thank you. Yes. So let's talk about that. This quote is taken from Child Guidance, page 442, paragraph 3. And please write these quotes down so you can go and check them for yourselves. Please don't say Brittany said, but you want to see what the Lord and the Spirit of prophecy has to say about these different topics. This is, I have been shown that persons of apparently good deportment, not taking unwarrantable liberties with the other sex, were guilty of practicing secret vice nearly every day of their lives. They have not refrained from this terrible sin, even while most solemn meetings have been in session. They have listened to the most solemn, impressive discourses upon the judgment, which seemed to bring them before the tribunal of God, causing them to fear and quake, yet hardly an hour would elapse before they would engage in their favorite bewitching sin, polluting their own bodies. They were such slaves to this awful crime that they deemed devoid of power to control their passions. We have labored for some earnestly, we have entreated, we have wept and prayed over them, yet we have known that right amid all our earnest effort and distress, the force of sinful habits has obtained the mastery, and these sins have been committed. So Sister White considers self-abuse to be polluting your body, right? And you know what was funny? While I was putting this together, and I was putting the different quotes together, I was looking online to kind of corroborate science with the pen of inspiration. You know what I found? When you're doing the common research, they don't consider this to be a bad thing. And I don't remember who was presenting one Sabbath, and they said that there were teachers who were actually teaching children that it's okay to abuse yourself. Can you imagine that? How twisted our world is. And it all comes down to, I guess our exposure, what we expose our mind to. And it's so easy that we can just swing the pendulum and say, oh, it's not that bad. It has benefits. It does these other things, but it's polluting your body, right? Hence why in the beginning, God didn't just create Adam by himself. He created Adam and Eve for a purpose, right? So let's continue. The minds of some of these children are so weakened that they have but one half or a third of the brilliancy of intellect that they might have had they been virtuous and pure. They have thrown it away in self-abuse. This is why it talks about children, because children are especially prone to this based on their associations, based on what they're taught, what they see, what they're exposed to. And she says they would be so much brighter, so much more brilliant if they had not been involved in these acts. Secret vice is the destroyer of high resolve, earnest endeavor, and strength of will to form a good religious character. So oftentimes you'll find persons who are struggling on their spiritual journey because they have not let go of this one thing. All who have any true sense of what is embraced in being a Christian know that the followers of Christ are under obligation as his disciples to bring all their passions, their physical powers, and mental faculties into perfect subordination to his will. Those who are controlled by their passions cannot be followers of Christ. They are too much devoted to the service of their master, the originator of every evil, to leave their corrupt habits and choose the service of Christ. As I spoke about before, based on the habits that we choose who we serve, whether it's Christ or the enemy of souls. Solemn messages from heaven cannot forcibly impress the heart that is not fortified against the indulgence of this degrading vice. The sensitive nerves of the brain have lost their healthy tone by morbid excitation to gratify an unnatural desire for sensual indulgence. The brain nerves, which communicate with the entire system, are the only medium. Is it one of the mediums? The only medium through which heaven can communicate to man and affect his inmost life. Whatever disturbs the circulation of the electric currents in the nervous system lessens the strength of the vital powers, and the result is a deadening of the sensibilities of the mind. In consideration of these facts, how important that ministers and people who profess godliness should stand forth clear and untainted from this soul-debasing vice. This one stands out to me too, because as I mentioned before, how does God communicate with us? Our seat of intelligence, right? And so if our brain, if this affects the nerves in our brain, then it distorts the messages and the communication lines between us and heaven. So it's very, very serious, very, very serious. So I'm going to move now into another thing that affects our mental powers, lack of exercise, which some of us don't want to hear this one. This says the time spent in physical exercise is not lost. Because person sometimes will say, oh, I don't have any time to exercise. And when I exercise, I should be doing this and that. But she says a proportionate exercise of all the organs and faculties of the body is essential to the best work of each. When the brain is constantly taxed while the other organs of the living machinery are inactive, there is a loss of strength, physical and mental. The physical system is robbed of its healthful tone, the mind loses its freshness and vigor, and a morbid excitability is the result. So it says the mind loses freshness and vigor. You think about And I was reading some articles as well. You think about brain diseases as you get older, like Alzheimer's and dementia, amongst others. It's declension of the brain faculties. And you realize that if you exercise, then the chances of you getting that earlier is less, if that makes sense. Everybody with me?
Sister Brittany, good morning again.
Morning.
I have a question, or something just came to mind when you was doing the self-abuse. Where does abortion fit in when not to kill and also an abuse? Where does abortion fit into that?
I have my thoughts on that, but I'm gonna throw that out to Brother Sheldon, Brother Keneal, Brother Marvin. Sheldon and I were just discussing that the other day. So Sheldon, if you're listening, go ahead and take that one. Or if he's not listening, anybody else before I share my thoughts on that?
Hello. Hello, everybody.
Keneal, Brother Keneal?
Yes, I'm here. Well, according to Jeremiah, God said, I knew thee. Jeremiah 1 verse 5. So before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. Before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee and ordained thee a prophet unto the nation. So that's before Jeremiah was even made. Right? So it tells us then that the world's view is that a life becomes a life when it comes out of the mother's womb and takes its first breath. That's really the philosophy undergirding, one of the philosophies undergirding abortion, right? There are other philosophies, which is, a utilitarian purpose, like the ends justify the means. Of course, we don't believe in that. We believe that you do what is right. Not even if the end justifies the means, you just do what is right, So God knows us from we were in the womb and even before. So imagine God knowing you and then killing. So our perspective on abortion is that it's not biblical and it's wrong and it shouldn't be done. It's really taking a life of an individual. And babies, science is not showing that babies are developing habits. They suck the thumb, they laugh, they giggle, they twirl around, they move. Those are babies, So it is a life just like you and I, not because it's not breathing air as yet, but its heart is beating from very, 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 very young.
Thank you. Thank you,
All
Brother.
right. Happy Sabbath, everybody.
Sabbath.
All right. So I'm gonna share, but I let me just read this first. I'm reading from Psalms chapter 139, verses 13, and I'm reading on to 16. For thou hast possessed my reins, thou hast covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. My substance was hid from thee when I was made in secret and curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Thine eyes did see my substance, yet being unperfect. And in thy books all my members were written, which in continuance were fashioned, when as yet there was none of them. What is that talking about? That is talking about the development of a fetus from the embryonic stage all the way down. This is how God regards the development of life from the embryonic stage. When does life begin? Simple. Based from a biblical perspective, it begins from there is what we call a zygote for those who have studied biology to any depth. And the zygote is at fertilization or develops a little bit after fertilization. So for us to go and to make statements to the contrary, what we're doing is we're going beyond what God wants us to. And that is not what God teaches from his words, which is exactly what Elder Williams said. But if you're of a leftist persuasion, then it becomes easier for you to justify these things, because that type of persuasion, it does not reason based on the existence and the teachings of God, but on something else.
All right. Thank you so much, Brother Sheldon. Now let's make one quick comment because we have to move on in the interest of time. But abortion, as Sheldon mentioned before, it's not biblical, as well as Elder Kenil. And if you look at it, it has no limits. When you look at what science says about when it's okay to have an abortion, the pin is always moving. They say a few weeks and a few months, then maybe it's going to be a few years. At what point does it stop? And you realize the devil doesn't really have any limits. And
But
so, go ahead.
Sister Britt, I just wanted to show something in there too, that they have now passed, or they were discussing passing a law. I think it was actually passed, I could be wrong on that one, that you can have post-term abortions, meaning after the baby is born. No limit.
There is no limit. So I don't venture down that road. Obviously for persons, each case is different. What if this person was this and the person was that? And, but where is that space for faith? Because I think we're trying to play God sometimes when it comes on to abortion. But yeah, I'm just gonna move quickly along. So another thing that affects our brains and our cognitive functions is sleep, lack of sleep, intemperance in sleeping. And some of us really struggle with this. I guess based on habit, going to school and having to stay up late to study, over time our bodies just get messed up. But it's important to develop regularity in your sleeping as much as possible, because it does affect your mental health. In here, it says from the testimonies, give the weary brain a rest. Unreasonable hours are destructive to the physical, mental, and the moral powers. If the brain were given proper periods of rest, the thoughts would be clear and sharp, and business would be expedited. Oftentimes when we lack sleep, we're very irritable. We can't think straight, we can't function properly. It's amazing what a good night's rest will do for your brain. So that's definitely something that we need to regularize. And if you need help, get help with that, because it is very important. It's also a cool thing to implement. Shalana and I have done this now for months. Is when you're going to bed, please put your devices out of your room. Anything that's tempting you to stay awake, your phone, your tablet, your laptop. Turn off the lights. Even if you're staring at the ceiling for a very long time, that's okay. But don't have anything in your room that's going to distract you from going to bed. Intemperance in eating. It's a key player of intemperance. You cannot afford to weaken your mental or physical powers lest you become unable to discern spiritual things. And I'll just skip down here, which it says overeating befogs the brain. The most precious words may be heard and not appreciated because the mind is confused by an improper diet. By overeating on the Sabbath, many have done more than they think to dishonor God. And this quote is talking specifically about Sabbath and overeating, not being able to focus on the word. But overeating in general befogs the brain. Maybe you can't even function at work because you're overeating. So you definitely have to be careful with what you put in your mouth and how much you put in your mouth and what you put together in your mouth, which I won't get into all of that today.
Sister
yes.
Brittany?
Yes, Brother Kenil.
As you talked about sleeping and good sleep hygiene, I even call to my own experience. Whenever I am tired, I think nonsense, I say nonsense, and when I sleep and wake up, your mood is just so wonderful because it's like your brain cleans, it goes through a cleaning and a defragmenting, and it puts back things where it should put. So I'm just imagining being constantly unrested, how that can really affect your brain and your mind. So I'm just thinking about myself. I've always made the observation that it's best to just go sleep and wake up in the morning. You wake up in a better mood. Look at a baby is grumpy. In the morning, they're smiling and they're happy. That's what the rest does to us, and the good sleep hygiene, because devices now are breaking our sleep cycle. Mhm. So
Definitely.
because you talk about a clear mind, I just want to make that link that it's a direct link, so direct.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think in a previous presentation I did on proper rest and the laws of health, it spoke about your body during the day builds up toxins. And when you sleep, your brain is able to purge whatever toxin has lodged itself there. So if you're not sleeping properly, you have toxicity in your brain that is lodged there because you're not getting, even if you're sleeping late, the body's not able to do proper detox because your melatonin levels are low, which is what is the hormone responsible for a lot of the repair work and a lot of the things that needs to happen while you're sleeping. All right, so going back to intemperance in eating, I'm gonna talk about the demoniac. Many of us would be familiar with this story in Mark 1. So I'm gonna read quickly here. The man praised God for his deliverance. So this is after God had delivered the man from the demon that possessed him. The eye that had so lately glared with the fire of insanity now beamed with intelligence and overflowed with grateful tears. The people were dumb with amazement. As soon as they recovered speech, they exclaimed one to another, "What is this? A new teaching? With authority he commandeth even the unclean spirits that obey him." The secret cause of the affliction that had made this man a fearful spectacle to his friends and a burden to himself was in his own life. He had been fascinated by the pleasures of sin and had thought to make life a grand carnival. He did not dream of becoming a terror to the world and the reproach of his family. He thought his time could be spent in innocent folly. But once in the downward path, his feet rapidly descended. Intemperance and frivolity perverted the noble attributes of his nature, and Satan took absolute control of him. Now that is scary. I don't know about you, but when I read this, I'm like, no man, this intemperance thing is a very serious thing. Can you imagine to get demon possessed? It starts with intemperance, intemperance, period, right? And so it's not something that we can joke with or just laugh about. It's very, 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 very serious. It says those who would have clear minds to discern Satan's devices must have their physical appetites under control of reason and conscience. The moral and vigorous action of the higher powers of the mind are essential to the perfection of a Christian character. Let me read that again. The moral and vigorous action of the higher powers of the mind are essential to the perfection of Christian character. And the strength or the weakness of the mind has very much to do with our usefulness in this world and our final salvation. The ignorance that has prevailed in regard to God's word in our physical nature is deplorable. Intemperance of any kind is a violation of the laws of our being. Imbecility is prevailing to a fearful extent. Sin is made attractive by the covering of light which Satan throws over it, and he is well pleased when he can hold the Christian world in their daily habits under the tyranny of custom, like the heathen, and allow appetite to govern them. And if we all recall what the initial sin was that has resulted in the entire world being fallen was appetite, right? God's telling not to eat something and you eat it. Try to rationalize it. Quickly, flesh eating says those who claim to believe the truth are to guard carefully the powers of body and mind so that God and his cause will not be in any way dishonored by their words or actions. The habits and practices are to be brought into subjection to the will of God. We are to give careful attention to our diet. It has been clearly presented to me that God's people are to take a firm stand against meat eating. Would God for 30 years give his people the message that if they desire to have pure blood and clear minds, they must give up the use of flesh meat if he did not want them to heed this message? By the use of flesh meats, the animal nature is strengthened and the spiritual nature is weakened. That is straightforward. The moral evils of a flesh diet are not less marked than are the physical ills. Flesh food is injurious to health, and whatever affects the body has a corresponding effect on the mind and the soul. Think of the cruelty to animals that meat eating involves, and its effect on those who inflict and those who be. Marvin, I think you're unmuted. How it destroys the tenderness with which we should regard the creatures of God. I remember Kenil, I think he was doing a health presentation when he talked about killing your animals to eat. It does something to your mind because you have to kill to eat them, right? It says God wants the perceptive faculties of his people to be clear and capable of hard work. But if you are living on a flesh diet, you need not expect that your mind will be fruitful. The thoughts must be cleansed, then the blessing of God will rest upon his people. Obviously, some of us will be familiar with the effects of alcohol, tobacco, black teas, and coffee. It says, Satan is taking the world captive through the use of liquor, tobacco, tea, and coffee. The God-given mind, which should be kept clear, is perverted by use of narcotics. The brain is no longer able to distinguish correctly. The enemy has control, and the man has sold his reason for that which makes him mad. Jumping down to this highlighted portion, it says tobacco affects the brain and benumbs the sensibilities so that the mind cannot clearly discern spiritual things. And I hope we all understand the theme here, why we're talking about the mind, because the mind is something that we should guard. In everything that we do, we should not allow our minds to be deteriorated further because it affects our spiritual journey. So talking about Abihu and Nadab, really quickly, it says anything that lessens the physical power enfeebles the mind and makes it less clear to discriminate between good and evil and between right and wrong. This principle is illustrated in the case of Nadab and Abihu. God gave them a most sacred work to perform, permitting them to come near to himself in their appointed service. But they had a habit of drinking wine, and they entered upon the holy service in the sanctuary with confused minds. There was a sacred fire which was kindled by God himself, but they used common fire upon their senses. Why don't use common fire? Like imagine God give you sacred fire, you go use common fire. I mean, obviously they're drunk, so they're not thinking straight. When they offered incense to ascend as a sweet fragrance with the prayers of God's people. Because their minds were clouded by an unholy indulgence, they disregarded the divine requirements, and there went out fire from the Lord and devoured them, and they died. Right? So ultimately, if you want to, look at it this way, when you're intemperate, whether it's in the sphere of drinking wine or alcohol that harms the body, you're gonna end up dead, right? Whether you're gonna drink yourself to death or when Christ comes, obviously you can't enter into the kingdom like that. Lack of water. Our brain cells depend upon water to carry out very essential functions. When water levels are low, it affects your concentration, it affects your memory and your problem solving. In health and in sickness, pure water is one of heaven's choicest blessings. Its proper use promotes health. It is the beverage which God provided to quench the thirst of animals and man. Drunk freely, it helps to supply the necessities of the system and assists nature to resist disease. Now, water is not the same thing as juice. Now, I've heard persons justify, say, oh, but I'm drinking juice, and it has water content, but it's not water. So those of us who are constantly drinking juice as a replacement for water is not the same, right? So you have to ensure that you're getting good amounts of pure water, pure soft water every day. And finally, talking about stress, something that we all can relate to. What is stress? It's how the brain and body responds to any demand or challenge, which in some cases it's warranted. Like, if you want to talk about the flight or fight hormone, if you're in a stressful situation and you need to run or you need to defend yourself. But this is talking about the long-term activation of the stress response system, right? And the overexposure to cortisol, which is a stress hormone, and other stress hormones that follow can disrupt almost all of your body processes. It includes many health problems, but namely, obviously, headaches, memory and concentration impairment, anxiety, and depression. And why do we experience stress? Can anybody tell me? Can anybody tell me why we experience stress?
Lack of faith.
That's right. Trust in divine power. If we're stressed out, we don't trust God. That's just fact. I don't know.
Too much.
Yes, we worry too much. And so we can't trust in God and be stressed out at the same time. You have to give one or the other. All right, so that is where I end my presentation for the morning. I hope it was a blessing to those who had their hearts prepared to receive it. I'm going to hand over now to Sister Shashoy. To Sister